Before I share a few words with you about this week's Torah portion, let me take a moment to thank some very special people who've helped me tonight as our rabbis are enjoying some much-needed and well-deserved vacation time. So that I would not be so lonely on the bima tonight, some wonderful members of our congregation have stepped forward to help lead us in worship. So, my thanks to Joy Arsham-Ansalon and Amy Arsham-Gerbrecht, to Joy Fox and Sandy Zeev, to Dr. Danny Glick, aka Danny in the back row, and you can see he's living up to his name in the back row, Nancy and Keith Livman, and to Dan Gross, and also to a very special teen member of our temple, to Rachel Isaacson for her chanting and singing tonight. I know, Rachel, you're going into the 10th grade at Laurel School in the fall. And a surprise from our friend Laura Martell, who is going into her junior, not senior year at OSU. Wow, to Laura, who helped us out with Romamu just a moment ago. So my thanks to all of you for helping, and I also want to thank this evening the unsung heroes of our congregation, our temple greeters and ushers. So thank you to Linda Angart, Dennis Cott, Carol Marshall, to Jim Mezzi and Harry Pichon, and also, thank you to Ron and Susan Kahn, who also did a reading this evening. Much gratitude to all of you. We want to thank all of you for everything you do to make sure that our services run smoothly, not just tonight, but always, and that when people come through the door of the synagogue, they feel welcomed. So friends, this week's Torah portion is named after Pinchas, the priest who was the grandson of Aaron. There are two significant stories in this particular portion. The first one having to do with Pinchas himself, who gruesomely slayed a couple in the previous chapter for acts of idolatry. And the other story, a landmark story found in our Torah portion, depicts perhaps the greatest biblical story concerning women's rights. Now, before we get to that landmark story, I want to share a personal story with you. This is a story about my first job in New York, a job that I held for a total of 6 hours. It was in September of 1982, 3 months after graduating from the University of Cincinnati's Conservatory of Music. I made the decision to move to New York City to pursue my dream of performing on Broadway. And I went to the Big Apple with 2 things in my wallet. My Actors Equity card, which I had earned the previous summer working with Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera, and also in my wallet, $600, cash. That's it. And even in 1982, that was a ridiculously low amount of money to move to Manhattan, but I had a plan. My plan was that on day 1, I was going to get a job waiting tables at one of those famous New York delicatessens. I planned that I would work at one of these delis for 2, maybe 3 weeks while hitting a dozen or so auditions in between my deli shifts, and then, of course, I'd be cast in my first Broadway show. It was a good plan. It was a great plan, I thought, but I know it was the stupidest plan. What was I thinking? So on day 1 in Manhattan, I waited until 3 p.m. when I was certain the lunch rush was clearly over, and then I walked into the famous Stage Deli, which was located on 7th Avenue, just 2 blocks from Carnegie Hall. I walked in confidently, and I asked if I could speak to the manager. And moments later, a man appeared. He was not the manager, but rather the owner, and his name was Mr. Katz. I was ready for Mr. Katz. After all, growing up on Cleveland's East Side, I had waitressing experience. At 16 years old, I waited tables at the Pronto Room, located in the old Higbee's at Severn Shopping Center. Just a couple heads nodding. By the time I was 17 years old, I was among the first hired to waitress at the brand new Swenson's ice cream restaurant, which opened on Chagrin Boulevard, right down there near Green Road. So I had experience in this area, and I was ready for anything that Mr. Katz might throw my way. Plus, I was broke, and I needed this job. Remember, I only had the $600. Now, Mr. Katz was a character. He was rough around the edges. He had no patience, and he seemed completely irritated that I was in his restaurant. He looked at me and barked, "You got any experience waiting tables?" I'm not sure that was his accent, but you know. And I replied, "Yes, I do." He continued, "You got any experience waiting tables in a deli?" Oh no. Oh God, I thought, what am I going to do? I didn't think about the deli experience question. Before I even knew what I was doing, I blurted out, "Yes." And then he said, "What deli?" I inhaled, and as I exhaled, 2 words came out of my mouth: Corky and Lenny's. Oh my God, I just lied to this man. I lied, and as I began to obsess that I had lied to Mr. Katz's face, before even 3 seconds had passed, Mr. Katz said, "You're hired. Be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Wear a white button-down shirt and black pants. You'll shadow one of the girls for the first 2 hours, and then you're on your own." A job. I had a job. I was elated. I needed to find a store to purchase my white shirt and my black pants, and I remember that after I purchased these 2 items, I had already now spent about $50. A lot of money, given I only had $600. I thought, no worries. I'll make a bunch of money in tips, and in 3 weeks, I'm going to be in a Broadway show. I showed up the next morning at the Stage Deli, looking sharp in my new shirt and pants, and I shadowed a very well-seasoned veteran waitress for nearly 2 hours. And then I had my own section of this legendary eatery. I was doing it. I was turning tables, keeping coffee cups filled, making sure everyone was happy, and of course, stuffing those tips in my little apron. And then the lunch rush hit. People were lined up, and that line was halfway down 7th Avenue. I kept my cool, but it was so busy in the deli that even Mr. Katz was now behind the counter, making sandwiches, sweating, his sleeves rolled up, and looking so angry. Each time I approached the deli counter, I'd happily shout out, "Ordering a corned beef on rye, please," or "Ordering a pastrami on challah, please." Minutes later, I'd return to the deli counter, each time picking up the sandwich, and I would cheerfully exclaim, "Thank you." 12:30 p.m. The restaurant was now crazy. And there I was, fast walking up to the deli counter. I called up, "Ordering a corned beef on rye, please." And at that moment, Mr. Katz lost it. He lost it. At the top of his lungs, he screamed at me, "Quit saying ordering a corned beef and rye, please. Just say Sebo on rye and get the hell out of the way." The entire restaurant came to a halt. Not a sound for 3, maybe 4 seconds, but for me it was an eternity. Everyone was staring at me, and then, as if nothing had happened, the restaurant went back to its noisy, boisterous chatter. My lower lip began to quiver. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I pushed through. The next time I came to the deli counter to pick up an order, I kept repeating my new mantra: "Don't say thank you. Don't say thank you. Just get the sandwich and get out of the way." All the orders I placed from that moment on, I reminded myself, please do not say please. Don't say please. Just say ordering a Sebo and rye and then get out of the way. And finally, it was 3 p.m. The lunch rush had faded. I was refilling salt shakers when Mr. Katz approached me, and slowly, he began peeling off bills, counting from his wad of cash as he said, "Here are your wages today. It's not going to work out. Too much please and thank you." I left the Stage Deli and I sobbed all 9 blocks to my friend's apartment. The next morning, I steadied myself and I walked over to the Celebrity Delicatessen at the Milford Plaza. I asked for the manager, and when she asked me if I had any experience waiting tables at a deli, I said, "Yeah, I used to work at the Stage Deli." I was hired and remained there for 2 months until I landed a job singing on a cruise ship. Oh, one part of the story I forgot to tell you. About 2 weeks before my last day at the Celebrity Deli, it was around 3 p.m. The restaurant was quiet, and I was refilling salt shakers. I heard a familiar voice, and I looked over my shoulder to see that Mr. Katz from the Stage Deli was in the Celebrity Deli talking to the cashier. I panicked. Oh no, what if he sees me? I thought, there's no way he would remember me, some gal who worked for him 2 months ago for a whopping 6 hours. but it still made me nervous. Once Mr. Katz left the deli, I went over to the cashier and I asked, "Hey, that man you were talking to, who is he?" And she said, "Oh, that's Mr. Katz. He's the owner." Now I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, what does this story have to do with this week's Torah portion? That's a fair question. And the answer is, well, absolutely nothing. Or maybe something. In this week's Torah portion, we are reminded that words matter. And speaking the truth matters. Telling a lie, even the smallest lie, can get you into an unpleasant or very difficult situation. And speaking up for oneself is a lesson we can all learn from our Torah portion. In Parashat Pinchas, we are introduced to 5 extraordinary women, 5 sisters who come to be known as the daughters of Zelophehad. Can everyone say Zelophehad? Maybe you want to name your next child Zelophehad. We are introduced to these sisters. The 5 sisters are Machlah, Noah, Hoglach, Milcah, and Tirzah. And these 5 daughters are in a very difficult situation. They decide to bravely approach Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the entire assembly, explaining that their father has died in the wilderness. As unmarried sisters who are without a brother, Zelophehad's daughters will not be allowed to inherit their father's land, as this was the ancient tradition of our people. And the story of the daughters of Zelophehad gives us a bird's eye view on patriarchal hierarchy and also important information on who had the right to inherit land in these times. The 5 sisters earnestly seek to have this minhag hamakom, which means this custom of the locale. They look to have this custom altered. And in their quest for justice, they speak the truth. They advocate for themselves, and because of them, a new law is born. We see the importance of this legal process in these ancient times and how Moses and the assembly understood the significance of the people confronting a tradition that may be unjust. And more than that, the issue brought forward by Zelophehad's daughters has proven to be a landmark case because of its lasting effect it still holds concerning the rights of individuals, specifically women. There are only 3 other cases in the Torah where we witness a legal process occurring. One is in the book of Leviticus, having to do with blasphemy, and 2 come from the book of Numbers, one with regards to impurities in keeping the Passover, and also dealing with those who break the laws of Shabbat. The case of the daughters of Zelophehad is quite different from these other 3 examples. In the first 3 cases, there are discussions as how Moses and the people might apply the laws that are already in place. With regards to the 5 daughters, we actually witness this law being brought to life. These marvelous and courageous sisters initiate a law, legislature that they originally asked for themselves, and ultimately that becomes sanctioned by God. In challenging the tradition of the community, the 5 daughters of Zelophehad helped to create a precious gift for future generations. So on this Shabbat, perhaps we all can pledge to work harder, to speak the truth, to advocate for others and for ourselves, and to do all that we can to ensure the rights of all people now and for future generations. Amen.